The cabin in rural Maine was Marin's idea. We were in our early 30s, trying to patch up a 4-year relationship that had grown cold and quiet. We thought a week of isolation, surrounded by birch and spruce, was exactly what we needed to find our way back to each other. But the silence we found wasn't peaceful, it was predatory. The illusion of safety shattered on Tuesday night when I dropped a fork. The kitchen floor sounded hollow, vibrating with a strange resonance. Driven by a gut feeling I can't explain, I pried up the boards with a butter knife. Hidden in a plastic sleeve were 3 pages of handwritten notes. The header, written in frantic but precise ink, read, "Instructions for the cabin. Please read before your second night." It was Tuesday, our second night, and the clock was ticking toward 1 a.m. The first rule made my blood run cold. Between 1 and 3 a.m., something comes to the clearing. It doesn't approach from the woods. It simply manifests. You will hear a rhythmic knocking on the walls. Do not look out the windows. We wanted to laugh it off as a sick prank by a previous guest, but Rule 6 stopped us dead in our tracks. It will try to separate you. It will mimic voices you recognize. But here's the catch. You will each hear something different. Stay in the same room. Believe each other, even when your senses tell you the other is lying. At 2:10 a.m., a voice came from the front porch. It was my mother, sounding patient and slightly annoyed, asking for help with a stuck door. But as I reached for the bolt, Marin tackled me, her face pale with terror. She whispered, "Who are you talking to?" "That's my father out there, and he's crying." 2 different ghosts at the same door. That's when I realized the instructions weren't a joke. They were a survival guide. Tonight, I'm going to tell you what happened during those 5 nights in Maine. Why the sound of the lake disappearing was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and what the final, chilling warning at the bottom of that page truly meant. I stayed the full week. I do not think I came back as the same person. Stick around, because after this, you'll never look at a peaceful rental listing the same way again. Full script. The cabin was Marin's idea. I want to be clear about that. Not because I'm blaming her, but because it matters later that she was the one who found the listing. She was the one who read the description out loud from her phone while I was driving. And she was the one who said the words, "This is exactly what we need." If I had found it, maybe I would have read the details differently. Maybe I would have noticed something in the photos. But I wasn't looking. I was driving, and I was tired, and we had been fighting for 3 days in that specific way, where you aren't raising your voices anymore because you've both run out of the energy required to make the other person hear you. We'd been together 4 years. We were not falling apart. I want to be precise about that too. We were doing what a lot of couples do in their early 30s, which is slowly discovering that the version of each other they fell in love with was a draft, and the final version has features neither of them reviewed. Marin needed stillness, and I needed stimulation. She processed things by going quiet, and I processed things by talking until I found the shape of what I meant. These are not fatal incompatibilities, they are ordinary ones. But we had been in a small apartment for a long time, and the walls were getting thinner in every direction. And when she found a week-long rental in a cabin outside Rangeley, Maine, for a price that felt like a clerical error, We both said yes for reasons that probably weren't the same reason, and that was fine. That was the whole plan. Go somewhere with enough space to stop echoing off each other. We arrived on a Sunday in mid-October. The property was at the end of a gravel road, about 15 minutes from the nearest town, which itself was the kind of place that has one gas station and a general store with a bell on the door. The cabin sat at the edge of a clearing that backed up against mixed forest, birch, maple, some spruce. There was a lake about a quarter-mile through the trees. You couldn't see it from the cabin, but you could hear it when the wind dropped, a faint lapping sound that I initially found comforting and later found difficult to listen to. The cabin itself was fine, not charming, not sinister. A main room with a wood stove, a kitchen with a propane range, one bedroom, a loft with a futon, a bathroom with plumbing that worked but complained about it. The owner had left a binder on the kitchen counter with Wi-Fi information, instructions for the stove, the number of a local handyman, and a laminated card explaining that the well water was safe but might taste like iron. Normal. All of it normal. I remember reading the binder while Maren brought in bags and thinking, this is going to be good for us. This is a place where nothing happens, and that's the point. The first 2 days were genuinely better. We cooked, we walked to the lake and sat on the dock and didn't talk, and it was the kind of not talking that felt like a choice instead of a failure. On Monday evening, she read a book while I got a fire going in the wood stove, and for about 40 minutes, we existed in the same room the way we used to, separately but together, and I thought maybe the money was already worth it. Tuesday night, I dropped a fork. This sounds like nothing, and it was nothing, except the fork bounced off the kitchen floor, and the sound it made was wrong. Not wrong in a dramatic way. Wrong in the way that tells you there's a gap underneath. A hollowness. I picked up the fork and tapped the floorboard with my knuckle, and there it was. The space below, maybe a few inches, resonating like a shallow drum. Maren was in the loft. I almost didn't mention it, but I'm the kind of person who opens panels and checks crawl spaces. Not because I'm brave, but because not knowing what's in a space bothers me more than anything I'm likely to find. I got a butter knife from the drawer and worked it into the seam between 2 boards. They lifted easily. They'd been lifted before. The nails were gone from one of them entirely, and the other had nails that had been pried out and set back in loosely, just enough to keep the board from shifting underfoot. Underneath, there was a plastic sleeve, the kind you'd use to protect a document from water. Inside the sleeve were 3 pages of notebook paper, college-ruled, covered in handwriting that was small and careful and consistent enough to suggest the person who wrote it was not panicking. They were organized. They had taken their time. The top of the first page said, "Instructions for the cabin. Please read before your second night." It was Tuesday, our second night. I sat on the kitchen floor and read all 3 pages. Then I read them again. Then I put them back in the sleeve and put the sleeve back under the floor and replaced the boards and stood up and washed my hands, which didn't make any logical sense but felt necessary. And then I went to the base of the loft ladder and told Maren I found something she needed to see. She came down and I pulled the boards up again and handed her the sleeve and watched her face while she read. I will tell you what the instructions said, but I want you to understand what it was like to watch another person read them, because that was the first time the experience became real in a way I couldn't manage alone. Marin's face didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't go pale. What she did was stop blinking for a very long time and then set the pages down on the kitchen counter and look at me with an expression I had never seen from her before, which I would describe as the face of someone who has just been asked to decide something they don't have enough information to decide. Here's what the instruction said. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but I have been over this enough times that I trust my recall. 1. Between 1 and 3 a.m., something will come to the clearing. You will not see it from the windows because it does not approach from a direction. It is simply not there, and then it is. You may hear it. The sound is like settling wood, but in a rhythm. Do not go outside between these hours, not for any reason. 2. It will circle the cabin. It is interested in openings. Close and latch every window before dark. The front door has a bolt. Use it. The back door does not lock reliably. Push the kitchen table against it. This is not a suggestion. 3. On your second night, it will try the doors. On your third night, it will stop trying and simply wait. The waiting is worse, but you are safer during the waiting. Do not misread the silence as absence. 4. The wood stove must stay lit between midnight and dawn. Not for warmth. The smoke matters. If the fire dies, relight it immediately. You will be tempted to let it go out. The temptation will feel like your own preference. It is not. 5. On the fourth night, it will speak. It will use a voice you recognize. It will say something that makes you want to open the door. The words will be specific to you. I cannot tell you what it will say because it will not say to you what it said to me. Do not open the door. Do not answer. 6. If there are two of you, it will try to separate you. It does this by making each of you hear something the other doesn't. You will begin to disagree about what is happening. You will begin to suspect the other person is lying or confused or losing their grip. This is the most dangerous part. The disagreement is the point. Stay in the same room. Believe each other, even when the details don't match. 7. On the fifth night, it will leave. You will know it has gone because the sound from the lake will come back. You will not have noticed the lake sound was missing until it returns. After it leaves, go. Do not stay the remaining nights. Do not convince yourself it was not real. At the bottom of the third page, there was a single additional line, in the same handwriting but slightly larger, as though the writer wanted to make sure it was legible. I stayed the full week. I do not think I came back as the same person. Please be smarter than I was. Marin put the pages down and said, "This is someone's idea of fun." I said probably. She said some previous guest thought it would be funny to scare the next people. I said probably. She said it's a cabin in the woods and people love doing this kind of thing. Horror fans, creepypasta people, bored hikers with a notebook. I said I know. And then neither of us said anything for a while. I watched her eyes move to the back door and then to the windows and then to the wood stove. And I knew she was doing the same thing I was doing, which was releasing the idea that it was a joke while pretending to hold on to it. I told her it was her call. We could leave in the morning. We could stay and laugh about it. She looked at me, and I could tell she was calculating whether suggesting we leave would mean admitting she was afraid. This is the kind of thing that happens when two people have been fighting. You start making decisions based on what the decision will say about you, rather than what the decision will do for you. She said we should stay. I agreed. We pushed the kitchen table against the back door. We closed the windows. I loaded the wood stove. We treated it like a game almost, like we were playing along. But we did every single thing the instructions said. That first night, Tuesday, our second night, I woke at 1:40 a.m. and I was already listening before I understood. I was awake. The cabin was doing what cabins do at night, contracting and ticking in the cold. The wood stove was thumping softly, and then underneath all of that, I heard something else. A sound like wood settling but paced. Even intervals, not random. A knock, and then a wait, and then a knock, and then a wait, circling. Starting at the front of the cabin, moving to the right side, passing the bedroom wall, reaching the back, coming around to the left, returning to the front. One full circuit every few minutes. Maren was awake too. I felt her hand find mine under the blanket and squeeze. Once. Hard. She didn't say anything. We lay there listening to make 4 full passes. Somewhere after the 4th, it stopped. I did not fall asleep again. At around 3:15, a bird called from the trees, and I began to breathe normally. In the morning, we sat at the table, which was still pushed against the back door, and drank coffee and did not discuss leaving. I don't fully understand why. It wasn't bravery. It might have been that the experience was the first thing in a week that we had shared completely, without any disagreement about what it meant. We were both frightened, and we both knew it, and neither of us was performing. That felt rare. That felt like something worth more than safety, which is an insane calculation. And I knew it was insane at the time, and I stayed anyway, and so did she. Wednesday, night 3. The instructions said it would stop trying the doors and simply wait. At 1 a.m., I was awake and ready, and I heard nothing. No circling, no rhythmic knocking. The silence was absolute in a way that silence is not supposed to be. I realized I could not hear the wood stove. I sat up and looked at it. The fire was burning. I could see the glow through the grate. But the sound it should have been making had been swallowed. The cabin was wrapped in something. Not darkness, not cold, just an attention. A pressure that had no source. Like being in a room where someone is standing behind you, except the feeling was coming from every wall at once. Maren was sitting up too, arms around her knees, staring at the door. She whispered, "It's right outside, isn't it?" It wasn't a question. The silence lasted until almost 4 a.m. It was worse. The instructions were right about that. Thursday, night 4. The night it would speak. We prepared. We talked about it openly, like adults, which was a version of us I barely recognized. We agreed. No matter what we heard, we would not respond. We would not open the door. We would stay together. We said this to each other in the afternoon light, with the reasonable, slightly embarrassed tone of people setting rules for a situation that could not possibly be real, and we both knew we were pretending the embarrassment was genuine, and it didn't matter. The agreement was real. At 2:10 a.m., a voice came from the front porch. It was my mother, not a generic older woman's voice. My mother's specific cadence, her specific way of starting a sentence with "honey" when she's about to say something she thinks I won't want to hear. She said, "Honey, The door's stuck. Can you come help me with this? My mother lives in Connecticut. My mother has never been to Maine. My mother did not know where I was, and the voice was so perfectly hers that my body was standing before my mind caught up, and Marin grabbed my arm and said my name the way you say someone's name when they're about to walk into traffic, and I sat back down. The voice spoke again. Same sentence, same inflection, patient and slightly annoyed, the way my mother gets when she thinks I'm being difficult. Then it stopped. Then, and this is the part I need you to understand. Marin turned to me and said, "Who is that?" And I said, "You heard that?" And she said, "It's a man. Sounds like my father." We heard different voices, speaking at the same time. From the same place, she heard her father asking to be let in from the cold. I heard my mother needing help with the door. We stared at each other, and for a moment, one vertiginous, nauseating moment, I doubted her. I thought she was confused. I thought she was hearing what I was hearing and misidentifying it, and I could see the same doubt in her face, aimed at me. It was doing what the instructions said it would do. It was making us disagree about what was real. The disagreement was the point. I took her hand and said, "We're both right. They're both real. We stay here." She nodded. She was crying, not from fear, from the effort of believing me when her own ears were telling her something different. The voices, came 3 more times. Each time the words were slightly different, but the tone was the same. Familiar, loving, needing something small. A door opened. A light turned on. Something easy. Something you would do without thinking if you didn't know better. Each time, the pull was physical. My legs wanted to move. My hand wanted to reach for the bolt. At 3 a.m., it stopped. The fire was still burning. Marin was still holding my hand. In the morning, I told her I wanted to leave that day. The instructions said the 5th night it would go. But the instructions also said the person who wrote them stayed the full week and did not come back the same. I did not want to find out what the 5th night felt like, and I did not want to find out what the 6th and 7th held for people who ignored the last line. Marin said no. She wanted to stay through the 5th night. She wanted to hear the lake come back. She wanted confirmation that it ended. I understood this about her. She needed completion. She needed the full shape of the thing. Leaving before the end would mean living with an open question, and for Marin, that would be worse than one more night. We argued. Not the way we'd been arguing for months, about dishes and silences and who needed what. We argued the way you argue when the stakes are real and you both know it, and you're both right. I wanted to protect us by leaving. She wanted to protect us by staying until it was finished. Neither position was irrational. Neither person was wrong. We stayed. Friday, night 5. I loaded the wood stove at 11 p.m. and we sat together on the bed. Dressed, shoes on, bags packed by the front door. At midnight, the silence came again. That swallowed, pressurized blankness. At 12:30, I heard the settling wood rhythm again, but faster now, not circling but receding, moving away from the cabin in a direction I could not name, not toward the road or the lake or the forest, but away in some axis that didn't belong to the geography I understood. At 1:15 a.m., Marin lifted her head and said, "Listen." The lake, the faint, soft lapping of water against the dock, a quarter mile through the trees. It was back. I hadn't noticed it was gone. Not just Tuesday through Friday. but gone in a way where my memory of the sound had also been suppressed, so that its return felt like waking from a dream where you'd forgotten you had ears. We left at first light. We didn't clean the cabin. We didn't strip the beds or take out the trash. We drove the gravel road to the highway and then south, and we did not stop until we were in New Hampshire, at a diner in a town I cannot remember the name of, where we sat in a vinyl booth and ate eggs that tasted more real than any food I have ever had. I need to tell you what happened after, because the after is the part I can't resolve. Maren and I did not break up. We are still together. We're better, actually, in ways that are difficult to explain to anyone who wasn't in that cabin. We learned something about each other during those 4 nights that years of ordinary intimacy hadn't uncovered. I learned that she will stay when I want to run, and that her staying is not stubbornness, but a form of faith. She learned that I will believe her when her experience contradicts mine, and that this costs me something real. We built a trust in that cabin that is stronger than anything we built before it, and we built it under conditions that should not be available to 2 people arguing about a rental in Maine. But here is what I cannot stop thinking about. The person who wrote those instructions saved us, genuinely. Their careful, precise, generous warning is the reason we followed the rules, kept the fire lit, stayed together, didn't open the door. They survived, and they hid what they learned in the only place a future guest might find it, under the floor, where no cleaning crew would look, where no property owner would think to check. And at the bottom of their instructions, they wrote that they stayed the full week, and they did not come back as the same person. They didn't tell us what happened on night 6 and 7. They didn't describe what changed in them. They just said, "Be smarter than I was." I've searched for records of that cabin. I've looked up the rental listing. It's still active. The reviews are normal. Great getaway. Very peaceful. Loved the lake. No one else mentions the floorboards. No one else mentions the sounds. Either no one else found the instructions, or everyone who found them did what we did, followed them, left early, and then didn't know how to talk about it. Or, and this is the possibility I return to at 2 a.m. when I'm awake and Maren is sleeping, and the apartment is quiet enough that I start listening for rhythms in the settling of the building. Or they found the instructions, and they stayed the full week, and whatever they became afterward wasn't the kind of person who leaves a review. I think about going back, not to stay, just to check that the pages are still there, just to make sure the next person has a chance. Maren says she'll come with me if I go, and I believe her, and I love her, and I know that if we go back, we will both hear the voices again on the 4th night, and this time they will say something new, something calibrated to who we are now instead of who we were then. I am not going back. But I think about it the way you think about a room you left something in. Not with longing, not with dread, with the specific, nagging awareness that a door you closed is still, so far as you know, standing open.